let me tell you a few words about Farah. Because I feel like I have an absolute privilege to get to introduce her. She'll be the first speaker for today, and I have always respected Farah's work. She's a transnational Black feminist, human rights activist, and the co-founder and the executive director of Black Women's Blueprint. And while I've always respected her work, it really was in 2016 when I attended the Black Women's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was chaired and envisioned largely by Farah, that I understood her tenacity and what a visionary she truly is. Her work has long taken place at the intersections, much like what I just spoke about. And I would say that I've been largely inspired by many of the speakers today in really helping to lead CalCASA in the direction that we're going. But she's such a visionary, and her work has taken place at the intersections for as long as I've known her. Her work is always about ensuring voices and experiences of Black women are visible and prominent, and that the legacy of slavery, sexual and reproductive exploitation, poverty, and the overcriminalization of Black women and girls are not overlooked. So when it came time to identify a speaker that embodies boldness to open the conference, we could not think of anyone more appropriate than Farah. So I'd like to ask you to please join me. I know we can't see each other, not everybody, but please join me in welcoming Farah Tanis.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, David. Thank you, NSAC. Family, family, family. I'm just imagining myself at the podium on stage, and I am envisioning a sea of you, a sea of revolutionaries, a sea of activists, a 5,000 of you, 5,000 strong. I greet you, family in the North. I greet you, family in the South. I greet you, family in the East. And I greet you, family in the West. I pray every day for a revolution, because make no mistake, it is not yet here, it is still coming. In the spring of 2020, I traveled to Benin, West Africa, in search of what philosopher Mark Nepo calls the possibility of oneness. And I stepped into a moment we've all been longing for, the moment when our hearts are so open that humanity fills us, the moment when our eyes are so opened by love and suffering that the heart of the world fills us. So in Benin, as I stood at the edge of the ocean, never before had I been so in touch with my own skin, bruised and battered. I realized that these United States had been leeching us. We were 4 years into a presidency which tore the wool from our eyes and revealed the fissures in our so-called alliances. The world was at war. The world was on fire. Shutdown was imminent. Now, more than ever, we needed an awakening. For me, before that night in Benin, whether we chose to acknowledge it or not, I knew that we, as a people, as a movement, we were estranged from each other. So the ritual began simply enough. I had walked what seemed like 4 city blocks through Benin to the ocean. I had flown even further, thousands of miles to be there. Thousands of miles to be there. The mixture of heat and cool ocean spray hit my face and I was shaking. I was naked with a young man in a white flowy dress digging a hole in the ground at my feet. I relaxed my shoulders. The woman at the edge of the ocean, who would be my spiritual mother, began to hum. I listened, and I did as she said. She cracked an egg at the nape of my neck, and I rubbed the yolk all over my body, letting the shells run down to my feet and into the hole dug by the young man, in which I was now standing almost knee deep. A bold move for me. I had actually consented to being stripped naked and in ritual. A bold move for me. I had set aside what I believe was the right way to do the work of liberation. A bold move for me as I was searching, realigning my energies, my intentions, my worldview, my disappointments, my struggles, my opinions about me, about you, about us, my will, my wants, and with my eyes sealed shut, I began to see everything. In ritual, I began to see what weapons my ancestors had used. I began to see that my ancestors met with your ancestors before the time we've come to know as the time of catastrophe, before 1619, before racialization and slavery, before male domination and the birth of patriarchy circa 8000 BC, when early agriculture yielded a surplus, and the beginnings of militarization helped males to seize control of that surplus and seize control of the main producers of labor and power, women. My ancestors met with your ancestors across the color of their skin, across the dichotomies of gender. They used their seeds, their shells, their medicine, and their herbs to wage peace, whether in Benin, in Haiti, in Ireland, or China. And today, whether on the streets of Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the streets of Louisville, Kentucky, I was not surprised that we all came together across difference, across race, across gender, to mobilize for justice, much as we are being called to do now in a bold move here at NSAC. So there, on the shores of Benin, this time it was me humming. I prayed, I sang, I swayed. I asked for the strength I needed to do what I knew had to be done. And then I felt it. My grandmother's hand was on my shoulder and she swayed with me. And behind her, my great-grandmother swayed with her. And behind her, my great-great-grandmother swayed with her, and with me. We swayed together as I imagined these four mothers reached as far back to where our life began, before this life, before this time, before this day. And I was broken open by grief and the knowing that how we grieve right now is foretelling of how we will relearn the world. I pray every day for a revolution, because make no mistake, it is not yet here. It is still coming. What is the bold move we need to make? What is the water's edge we need to stand on? What is it we need to strip bare? What is the egg we need to crack? What do we need to stand knee deep in? Who do we need to sway with? What do we need to reimagine beyond what we think are the obvious systems changes? And who do we need to be in communion with in order to make our bold vision manifest? Lastly, what prejudices and preconceived ideas and agendas do we need to let go of? Because as articulated by an old philosopher, William James, in trying to right the wrongs of his people, a great many people think that they are thinking when they are merely just rearranging their prejudices. What then is our bold move? The recent uprisings against white supremacy and the inequities exposed by the COVID pandemic have underscored the need for bold moves, for radical moves, a radical interruption of current cycles of deprivation of humanity through sustainable macro, meso, and micro level change. These recent racial and health catastrophes have not only reinvigorated the need to again underscore the style of primary prevention articulated in the parable of heading upstream, stopping harm by going to where it begins at its original source, but it amplifies what we must restore forward by making bold moves beyond voice, beyond language, beyond affinity groups, beyond allyship, beyond protest, and beyond voting into office new leaders in a cyclical phenomenon that only reproduces dehumanization, dominance, exploitation, degradation, and the undermining of interconnection and community. We cannot go back. We cannot go back to life as it were before this current administration. We cannot go back to the same old restorative justice models. We cannot go back to the same old VAWA. We cannot go back to the same old prevention strategies. We cannot go back to the same old offices. Black Women's Blueprint recently closed on a 300-acre land in New York, a place for the world to recover, an actual reconciliation center, because we cannot go back to life as it were before this current administration. Bold moves mean we repair and restore in ourselves first what has been broken in ourselves. We are the walking wounded, but how we grieve right now will foretell how we will relearn the world. In a world we're living in isolation, sheltering inside our homes and away from each other has become necessary to our very survival. The creation of spaces driven by emergent possibilities, relational resilience, openness, accessibility, public visibility with one another, white and Black and Indigenous people of color, gender nonconforming, trans and cisgender people, to be seen with one another in one accord without discomfort is a bold move. What bold moves takes us out of individualistic and over-intellectualized think tank spaces into more united, communal, healing spaces? We need a framework for organizing that disrupts the notion that we need to look at violence from the widest possible level, focusing on the bigger picture, looking at violence from a position high up in the sky, thus only getting a sense of how things are related to each other on a grand scale, all the while forgetting each other, giving up on harm doers, and creating professional distance with not only others who are different from us, but with victims and with survivors. Bold moves are required. Only then can we build an interconnected and vibrant community which provides the conditions for those who have caused harm to heal, to thrive, and practice interconnection absent of racist and patriarchal criminal justice and other systems. We must ask ourselves, in the Engaging Men movement, what will it take to radicalize prevention and challenge the idea that it is only men who can talk to other men? It is only men who will be listened to by other men in order to end violence. What bold move is needed to radicalize white affinity spaces operating on the assumption that it is only white people who should engage other white people to unpack the effects of racism and what they need to do to end it? How can this be done for us without us? Men's groups, are you not the least bit curious about what women, girls, and other genders, all genders, think? Are you not the least bit curious about how we want to experience you? White affinity spaces, are you not the least bit curious what we think, what we need, what we know would end racism? What if the bold move was to get us in conversation with each other instead of just about each other by way of discussing ourselves? We need to change the energy of our movement and reject disjointed, isolationist tendencies while resisting age-old tactics of divide and conquer. This brings to mind, for me, the swarm of cicadas that visit my backyard. They've been visiting my backyard all summer. As I sit outside in the late afternoon in my backyard, I listen to them sing daily, calling and responding to each other. The cicada do this during the day, and they are largely silent at night, but at night, the song of the crickets rise. And this is where the radical happens, there, in the twilight hours, as the sun sinks into the sky. The crickets with their high-pitched chirps and the cicada with their bodies like violins and their deeper sound actually merge for a remarkable moment. At first, the sounds are disjointed, but at twilight, as the cicada and the crickets continue to sing together, each in their own transition, they begin to harmonize and merge, vibrating at the same frequency. Then you realize their energies have aligned and they have somehow managed to match each other in ritual and match each other's intentions to fill the earth with sound and song. We are in the twilight hours, family. The coming election, the racial tension, the police killings, death in our streets. We have a pandemic ravaging our bodies, our people. These are the twilight hours. We are losing so much. If we don't wake up, we might miss this moment to be in synchronicity with each other, this very specific moment to make a bold move toward each other. We need to be one organism. What are we here for? Are we here to end violence? Are we here to end patriarchy? Like I did in Benin, can we hearken our ancestors and our ancient rituals and align our voices? Will you answer the call? I pray every day for a revolution, and the revolution is you. Yes, we are the revolution. Will you answer the call to make a bold move and go one step further to be the revolution? I want you to say it loud with me, and I invite you to close your eyes if need be. And really, let's vibrate together at the same frequency in our old traditions and rituals of call and response. I want you to answer, we are the revolution. Say it with me. We are the revolution. We are the revolution. For our girls, we are the revolution. For our trans-identified siblings, we are the revolution. For our brothers, we are the revolution. For those who can't breathe, we are the revolution. For our neglected neighborhoods, we are the revolution. For our people in cages, in prisons, in detention centers, we are the revolution. For our people at the borders, we are the revolution. For birthing mothers dying in maternity wards every single day, we are the revolution. For all the survivors of violence, we are the revolution. Every time you say, we are the revolution, feel it in your throat, feel it in your chest, feel it in your bones, feel it in your heart. I invite you now to speak their names. Say the name of someone for whom you are the revolution. For yourself, you are the revolution. We need to create change that outlasts us all. And to do that, we must be the revolution. We need to create change that restores everything forward into a future we might not see, and be okay with that. Knowing we may not make it and still raising our voices to reverberate through time and space across our genders. across our races, across all our identities. That is the bold move. This is our moment. We've been praying every day for a revolution, and the revolution is us.